Good morning, everybody. And once again, we're live on the commute over here in lovely Missouri. We've got it's been a busy couple of days, and so I know I don't have time to get a regular live together. I thought I'd talk about what was going on so we can get current on the situation. Understand this is a live carried out without my notes, without all the stuff I have. Also, it's a little bit shaky right now, so expect that to be able to see a lot of jitter as I'm on a little bit of a rough road at the moment. The news from Ukraine, and actually it was the meeting between Zelensky's team and the United States team over in Saudi Arabia, where they hammered out some agreements. Now, one of the air and on the sea, and kind of take it easy on ourselves in those two areas, and we can move from that point to see what else happens. And the U.S. delegation came back with, no, let's have a full 30-day ceasefire, effective immediately if we can get the Russians to agree with it. Well, before this agreement happened, Ukraine had launched a massive drone strike on Russia, going into the Moscow area, and the Russians claimed to have shot down nearly all of the incoming drones. The big refinery near Moscow was hit, they believe taken offline. At least the last information I had was that that's what they believed. Then there was some others that they say debris hit various buildings, including residential buildings. Air defense missiles taking out stuff and causing those to happen. I'm sort of surprised, honestly, that the Russians haven't. Sort of surprised. Oh, sorry. Honestly, that the Russians haven't. Sort of surprised. Hang on. Oh, sorry. Honestly, that the Russians haven't. Sorry about that. I was just flipping this over so I could kind of keep an eye on what was going on, and I forgot I had the volume in the van turned up. So, anyway, I'm sort of surprised at this point the Russians haven't made more hay out of that attack, claiming it was deliberate targeting of civilians. I have seen some indications that some are claiming that already. Now, on top of that, once this proposal came together, the Russians have not responded yet, to my knowledge. They've been surprisingly quiet on this specific arrangement, so we'll have to see how that goes. However, they did, over the last week, they have launched pretty much massive assaults in the Kursk area. Initially, those were being repelled pretty well, but the Ukrainians started pulling their lines back some because of some of the actions they were doing. Understand, the Russians pulled resources from everywhere else on the front to get armored vehicles and soldiers in there to try and assault the Kursk salient and retake it. Especially, honestly, the Russians cannot afford to have any of Russia in Ukrainian hands once the ceasefire hits, because that is a negotiating position that is untenable for them. That said, there were some interesting stories that came out of it. For instance, the Russians tried to sneak. I've gotten two different numbers, so you'll have to bear with me on this one. 800 or 100, but either way, a large number of soldiers through a pipeline into Sudzha. And this is a gas pipeline. And between suffocating from lack of oxygen and then, of course, Ukraine blowing up parts of the pipeline and attacking the soldiers therein, they experienced massive losses in that assault. The Russians did. But overall, it looks like the situation in Kursk is, I'm going to use the word resolving, not in Ukraine's favor at this point in time. But that was capped off when Russia dropped a 3,000 kilogram bomb on the center of Sudzha. Now, this is new information. Came in, I think, last night. I'm still getting details on exactly who, what, and where. But just for those of us who are not metric natives, a 3,000 kilogram bomb would be roughly 7,000 pounds, roughly, times 2.2. So you're looking at a lot of explosives that got dropped in the middle of a Russian town. Now, that's one less 3,000 kilogram bomb that the Russians can use on Ukraine. So in that regard, it certainly handled their, certainly is a good from Ukraine's perspective. But the interesting thing is that Russia felt that they could not actually take their own land back without resorting to the scorched earth, absolute destruction tactics that they have been using on Ukraine. So interesting to see. It also indicates the weakness of the Russian military overall, especially as they've been losing in Pokrovsk and Toretsk in steady fashion. The Ukrainians are rolling back months of gains from the Russian military in those areas, and we're watching that happen practically in real time. Now, as far as this peace deal goes, again, it's in Russia's court now. The big benefit from Ukraine's perspective, understand that after the blow up in the Oval Office, the U.S. had cut off military aid and intelligence sharing. And the word is that they have turned that back on. Now, I don't know what level of military aid or if it's just intelligence sharing that's coming back in. But the big changes, and I'm going to say this straight up here, the big changes always seem to happen when the U.S. pulls back, Russia advances hard. It's that simple. So every time the U.S. stops giving aid, Ukraine starts having more trouble, and that's because Ukraine can't expend their ammunition in the way they could because they don't know for sure they're going to get replacements. That's straightforward. Now the European Union is stepping up. There's word that they've got an 800 billion euro, not aid package because that's not what it is. Basically, rebuilding the militaries of Europe so they can stand on their own 2 feet. And we'll see how that goes. But Europe is stepping up. The UK is stepping up. But even when they're stepping up, they're saying, look, if you really want to get this done, we really need to have the Americans on your side, on our side. So right now, Europe is doing everything they can in theory. The question is, what are they going to do in practice? So overall, that's the situation, and there's just no easy way to come to all this information. The thing is that the U.S. is splitting its attention in a whole lot of different ways, waging trade wars on Canada, Mexico, Greenland, Panama, China. Well, China not so much, but yeah. Absolutely, Robbie. Always going to be driving safe on this. It's the reason why I don't have to. I set all this up and just I can talk to you guys while I'm actually driving. I also only do this when I'm on the open highway, so it makes it real easy here. Glad to have you on board anytime, by the way. So the U.S. is busily getting into trade spats with the European Union, Canada, Mexico, China, and it's a lot of, it's unfocused, and that's about the most charitable way I can express it right now. The lack of focus is concerning, and that means that things like Ukraine are going to fall through the cracks in certain ways. That said, we're going to have to just see what comes out of this. Will Russia agree to the ceasefire? Well, here's the possibilities, in my opinion, because we're talking opinion right now. The possibilities, first up, Russia says no. They absolutely refuse. However, they're unlikely to do that, and I'll express why in a moment. Russia says no. Donald Trump takes this as a personal affront because his team had negotiated a ceasefire, and he was telling everybody that Putin was looking for peace. and he just goes to town on. I don't think that's happened, but that's one possible. The second one, and this is the most likely in my opinion, Russia delays. Russia delaying is most likely because the longer they delay, the more uncertain the situation with Ukraine becomes. And as it's uncertain, well, then they have challenges that they're addressing there. It's the uncertainty is the biggest problem right now. Russia thrives in uncertainty and chaos when they're doing it to their enemies, obviously. And that uncertainty is going to make it harder for Ukraine and for the entire Western world to be able to deal with it. So I think they're going to delay. They'll do this with various diplomatic things. Well, our concerns aren't being addressed here. Let's negotiate some more. Let's talk this over. The ceasefire just isn't sufficient by itself. And I genuinely expect that the claim of needing security guarantees for Russia will be one of those delaying tactics. The same thing that Ukraine is asking for, security guarantees that'll prevent Russia from just starting it up again. So delay. This is, I think, the most likely one. Because the longer they can delay, the longer it causes the uncertainty, the longer the Russia can keep up the war and keep it going. This also means that Ukraine is going to be under a few more fuzzy handcuffs, things that are going to hold them back from doing things because they're negotiating a ceasefire. So I expect delay is what Russia's going to do. Third possibility, Russia says yes. And there are benefits to doing this. Russia says yes, they get 30 days guaranteed, and they're going to spend that 30 days preparing, fortifying, reinforcing the areas they want to do their next assault. And at the end of that 30 days, they assault. Now, make no mistake, the most likely way they're going to do that is by claiming that Ukraine broke the ceasefire in some way, shape, or form. And therefore, they're going to once again get on the move. When they're hoping that Ukraine has let its guard down and things have and they can catch them off guard. That said, I don't think Ukraine's going to spend that time idle either. I expect them to be reinforcing. I expect them to be countering Russia's moves, preparing more troops, training more soldiers, getting more equipment in every way they can. While it will be a ceasefire, it would certainly not be peaceful. And I expect that both sides will state that there have been deliberate provocations by the other side. The question is only who do you trust out of the two parties? Then there's another option, and I'm going to forward this one, despite the fact that I consider it the by far least likely one. Russia says yes and keeps their word. Now, I don't consider that a likely one because they have not shown that to be their pattern at all. But I can easily see Russia agreeing on a ceasefire for 30 days and finding ways to extend that for about 3 years. Namely, about as long as Donald Trump will be in office. And if that be the case, agreed on, one of the things I'm certain that they'll insist on is that sanctions have been lifted, or at least greatly reduced. And if that is allowed, then for 3 years, Russia will rebuild effectively without any restraint at all. They'll have access to Western equipment and hardware, not obviously their military hardware, but all of the commercial and components they need in that time period to rebuild and prepare for a new assault. Now, will that assault happen in Ukraine? Maybe. Maybe not. I'm not going to address that specifically, but I think that the 3 years will definitely be used, especially without sanctions, to rebuild and modernize Russia's military hardware until they are ready for a new and fresh attack, either on Ukraine or on somewhere in the European Union area, probably the Baltics. And then, of course, there's the final option, which I put very low percentage on, and that is Russia says yes, and they keep their word for the rest of it, for the rest of time, at least until Vladimir Putin leaves. Is this likely? I don't think so. If it happens, will I be ecstatic? Yes. Yes, I will. I just don't expect it. I don't have any feeling that that's going to be the case. So that's the options we've got out of the ceasefire, as far as I can tell. Now, Robbie, you know you're on here. Absolutely pipe in the comments and let me know what you think as far as these options go, which one you might see the best possibility on. I know you just released it with Real Guys Real Talk. I have not had a chance to see it because I literally fired up mine when I was just as I was going in. So absolutely go check out Real Guys Real Talk. Check out Robbie's video where he talks about this. He and I have I would say similar but diverging opinions on the situation, and I absolutely value his opinion in many ways. So absolutely feel free to jump over there and check it out. I don't have the link, and I certainly wouldn't be trying to give you the link while driving down the road. So don't expect that at all. But overall, yeah, that's the possibilities there. We're seeing a lot of interesting movement, though, overall. And the effects of this war and the way it's playing out will have ramifications across the world. If Russia is allowed to keep territory in Ukraine as they are, with basically no real consequences, China's going to look at that. And they're going to be saying, you know, Taiwan's looking pretty tasty. Now, Taiwan's doing some interesting things. They have now promised to build a chip fab over in the United States instead of keeping all of their stuff in Taiwan. So that's headed to Donald Trump. And Donald Trump will say, oh, look, they're building a chip fab over here like I asked for. And therefore, maybe we're going to be more motivated to provide them with arms and equipment, arms sales, because I don't think he's going to just give them aid packages, but arms sales, equipment, maybe even put a unit, a couple of companies of soldiers, or maybe a naval presence on Taiwan itself. I could see that happening because Taiwan's playing the Trump game. The people who aren't playing the Trump game are Canada and Greenland. Now, make no mistake, I see no venue that results in Canada being the 51st state in any near term at all. And some people are like, well, that's just negotiating tactics. That's typical Trump bombast. I would say that can't be true, mainly because Trump keeps coming back to it. And he doesn't seem to have a set of requirements that would resolve the situation. He even went so far as to say a 1908 treaty that was used to make sure that they had defined a few really minor borders. I mean, extremely minor bits of swampland and things like that around the Great Lakes area. He's saying that he's not convinced that is valid anymore. So Canada has been getting really ticked off about this. Now, something about Canadians, as we have heard say many times, it's never a war crime the first time. And there are many things in the Geneva Convention that would basically rip right out of what Canada did in various wars that they were in. They're really nice people, but when it comes to getting their kick butt on, they are certainly quite willing to jump in there and mix it up. This does not mean that they are our military equal in any way, shape, or form. But this has been one of our staunchest long-term allies. They aren't interested in being Americans. Uh, they live in our shadow plenty as it is. The fact is, the whole spat, and this understand this is my disclaimer. I am not a huge connoisseur, I guess, of Canadian politics. But up until this talk about a 51st state started happening, the Canadians were on the verge of electing the most conservative government that they have had in my lifetime. Now, their idea of conservative and our idea of conservative are different things, but definitely more pro-United States than the liberal government that has been there, more aligned with the United States conservative positions. They nearly would have had that until this talk started, and it literally resurrected the Liberal Party up there, and they have now put a new prime minister in. That's another Liberal. I don't know what the party name is up there, but I think it's Liberal. This guy is a former Bank of England president, and he actually helped the there was two major government banks that he helped pilot through really rough times. So this is a guy who understands economics. This is a guy who understands finance. This is a guy who understands business. And the whole tariff situation and the whole situation here, he's not going to be scared by these types of comments. He's not going to be concerned by it. He is going to basically make the most of Canada's position. That said, there have been several concessions by Canada so far. They have gone through and double-checked, and they've actually talked about getting they've started reducing some of their tariffs and their taxes. There are quite a few tariffs that Canada has levied against the United States to protect their own businesses. The thing is, tariffs don't work. They basically they basically just reduce ability to make money effectively for everybody. So that's just it's caused some concessions, and that's the key there, is that these things are supposed to drive concessions. But I've not seen anything truly vocalized as to what would solve this between Canada and the U.S. All things just to keep an eye on. But Canada basically said, look, if the U.S. isn't going to support Ukraine, we are going to support Ukraine even more. So they passed another deal. This is all the crazy things that are going on. Things on this. And at this point, in about 23 minutes of me yammering at the phone, thank you, Robbie. I did see that you had a comment there, and please do post that link. And I think generally you're agreeing on the things I'm saying. From what I'm reading here, just a quick glance here. So absolutely, thank you, Robbie, for your comments. Do appreciate it. Absolutely drop that link in. Now's a good time. I'm going to go ahead and sign off for today. Thanks again, and you guys have a great rest of your day. We'll see you on the next video.